once Nazi Germany is in power and it start taking control of the economy, what was the Aryanization of Germany's businesses, and to what extent did the wealthiest dynasties, the billionaires, play in that policy?
So let's first give it a definition of what Aryanization was, because it's such a perversely cynical term, but it is to remove the Jewish aspect of ownership from an asset, whether that is company shares, real estate, jewelry, land, art, you name it, any kind of asset with any kind of relative value. For it to, Aryanization is that process to remove the aspect of Jewish ownership from that asset. And it really started ramping up. So the way it developed was Hitler initiates mass rearmament, of which already or the main characters in my book greatly profited from, many industrialists and financiers, because you suddenly have billions of Reichsmark flowing into their coffers and into their factories to produce armaments in violation of the Treaty of Versailles. He goes public with that in early 1935. And of course, with the introduction of the Nuremberg race laws in September 1935, the persecution of Jewish German citizens of Nazi Germany is heavily ramped up. Aryanization was one massive aspect of that, and it was, it initially had the veneer of a legal business transaction where Jewish business owners or Jewish business families would be coerced by either by the state or by their competitors, by fellow fellow German business owners and entrepreneurs, to sell their companies or whatever assets they owned far under market value. But what was also often the case, and increasingly became so as persecution ramped up, was that Jewish business families, Jewish families wanted to sell their assets at fire sale prices because they wanted to leave Nazi Germany as soon as possible, and they needed money they need to raise money to get out, because in addition to Aryanization, the Nazi regime had put in this so-called Reich flight tax, which basically, in order to be able to leave the country, you basically had to, there was a heavy tax was imposed, and you basically already had to give up all of your assets just in order to immigrate or to be able to leave. Initially it had the veneer of a legal business transaction. As the 1930s ramped up, and persecution ramped up, and the 1930s evolved, it devolved into outright theft and seizure of Jewish-owned companies and assets, where they were just stolen outright, which was, of course, a practice that you see continuing during World War II, where, of course, companies owned by non-Jewish entrepreneurs and businessmen in German occupied territories also get seized and expropriated outright. Now, in the 5 families that I write about, which are still today Germany's wealthiest business dynasties, they would, for example, one of the families I write about, which co-founded Allianz and Munich Re, 2 of the world's largest insurers back then and today, they also owned a private bank called Merck Fink, and they were able to acquire the Rothschild Bank in Vienna, Austria's largest private bank at the time, and the Dreyfus Private Bank in Berlin, one of Germany's largest private banks at the time. at fire sale prices after their owners were either put imprisoned by the SS, as in the case of Louis Rothschild in Vienna, and coerced to sell over all his assets. The largest art collection in Austria, largest real estate holdings, and in addition, his family's private bank. Or in the case of Willy Dreyfus, where August von Fink, one of the antagonists, one of the main characters in my book, coerces him to sell his private bank, his family's private bank, at a much lower price, demanding all these write-offs on the balance sheet, etc., in order to get a better price. And that is something that you consistently see with all the families I write about, or with all the business patriarchs, is that they, basically through coercion, more often than these families having the intention to sell, through coercion, buy up competitors' companies on the cheap.